Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we have with us a renowned filmmaker, Nutan Manmohan.
Hi everyone.
Hi Nutan. So I would like to tell you something about Nutan. Nutan began as an investigative journalist with TV Today in 1987. And since then, it has been 25 years of her life which she has given to the world. Nutan, as you said, and I read about it, journalism is not a job, it's ishq. Do it only if the bug has bitten you. What nurtured you into filmmaking?
There was a time when, as students, we really thought that we could make a change and make positive change. And there was a time when the owners and the editors were journalists themselves. So there was a lot of energy in television channels, in radio, in magazines to bring about, to put a spotlight on problems in a positive way. So the journalists used to get involved in finding out what are the real issues, how to solve them. And it was a very electric time for India, because this is the time when liberalization was happening. This is the time when electronic media was starting, television was starting, and we were coming out of the single media, single Doordarshan age. So pictures were not seen. It's the first time that television pictures were coming, color was coming.
Right.
So there was a lot of energy, and students were very idealistic. There was a different breeze in the air, and we were very fortunate that that's the time when big changes were coming about, but we were able to effect a change in them, in the sense that if we saw some problem, we put the spotlight on it and saw the results.
Right.
I'll give you a very small example. For instance, I once came across a story in which there was a welfare home which was not being run well. The inmates were being abused, and there was a lot of illicit trafficking of girls which was happening. We covered that story. It was discussed in the Bihar Assembly, and it led to a change in the management, and the girls were then put in a safe environment. The management changed. So it was very satisfying to do something and bring about a change. Many such stories happened. We were part of coverage, for instance, in Neham, in Mandal. We put a spotlight on how the government was going the wrong about bringing about a reservation. A big change has happened now, where television channels and their journalists are perhaps very consumer oriented. They're just, first of all, the ownership of television channels is now changed. It's very corporatized. So if the owner of a channel is not an editor, is not a journalist, the whole focus of news coverage is very different. So that has really changed journalism.
So you've been writing, and you were a part of Newstrack's first batch of self-trained TV journalists who experimented with ways to do investigative journalism at a time when no precedents existed. Amazing.
Yeah. So at that time, television was new in India. Nobody knew what was, how to go about things. Technology was in our hands.
Right.
And we experimented with a lot of things. And investigative journalism was something that we knew instinctively what to do, but we really didn't have any techniques. So we sort of brought out ways, and we handled dilemmas, and we just went about it. But in the process, we uncovered a lot of things which were happening for a long time, and possibly made some amount of positive contribution.
So did anything excite you at that time? Like, I want to do this topic, I want to pick up this theme, or I don't know what you...
We went very intuitively into subjects. For instance, we came to know about a new militant movement happening in Northeast called the Bodo movements. And the Bodos were tribals who had very little exposure. In rest of India, people didn't know about their problems. They had no idea why students were angry. They had no idea why so many villages were stopping and blocking the path and not allowing any police people or any army people to come to their villages. We didn't know what were their problems. And so we just picked up our camera and we went there. The amazing thing was that the amount of long row that your editors and your organization used to give us. Now, when you open television, you see a small clip and it runs on a loop. And you don't come to know about the story. You have the same bite which keeps running. But at that time, our editors gave us a long row. So I ended up being there for 3 weeks. We ended up interviewing a lot of people, being with the Bodo leadership, and really discovering that what is their problem. And we realized that a lot of illegal immigration is coming from Bangladesh, which is making these tribals a minority in their own village. And that's the reason why they are protesting and nobody is listening to them. So we covered all those issues, and I think both sides were able to then understand each other's problems.
Your story triggered a special session of the Assam Assembly for a debate on performance of the Prafulla Kumar Mahanto government.
Yes.
Amazing. You made a difference to them.
So that was the satisfying thing at that time, to actually file stories which bring some change.
Right. How much time does it take for you from thought to display? And what challenges do you face when you write or you make or you produce something?
Well, every story has a life of its own. Some stories happen like the words come out of your mouth and then somebody sponsors it and it happens. In other times, for 2-3 years you'd be struggling and trying to convince somebody about that story, and then it takes life.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. I once saw a very small piece that vultures in India are dying, and it's a mystery.
Okay.
So I suggested it to my commissioning producer in National Geographic Channel that it's a very interesting story, I want to investigate it. I finally came to know that there is a British organization called RSPP which is also investigating this issue.
Okay.
And I did a small story, a 5-minute story, and we came to know that very strangely, vultures are a very important bird, because if the cattle dies in India, they're simply left outside the village.
Right.
Nobody takes care of that. And it's the vultures who then finish off that cattle within a day. And the reason why vultures are dying is because in India, the vets are using a medicine called diclofenac in excessive quantity. All cattle for every problem is just pumped with diclofenac.
Okay.
And when the vultures eat the dead carrion, their kidney fails, and so they're dying. So can you imagine a science mystery kind of a thing was happening, that one very crucial species were dying all across India.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I also.
And all because a veterinary drug was being excessively used. So that small story triggered an interest. I filed it for National Geographic Channel. There used to be a program called National Geographic on Assignment, for which I did a 5-minute piece. They had a magazine show. They then commissioned me to do a longer piece. So I ended up traveling all across, covering, how the connection was there. And finally, Discovery then asked me to do a full piece. So I did a 1-hour film on it. That film was shown by the then Secretary Environment, Pradipta Ghosh, to the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who changed the law on diclofenac and phased out diclofenac. So, it is how a film has a life of its own. We were simply doing our job, but somebody picked it up and it became useful. The sad part of the story is that by the time this puzzle was solved, almost 98% of Indian vulture population had been wiped out. And we had very small populations of griffon vulture.
Right.
And in Rajasthan there is a very small population, because those are very poor farmers, so they don't put diclofenac, they have no veterinary support. So can you imagine, it is the poor farmer who was not using this rich drug, diclofenac.
Right.
And as a result, vultures were intact. In outer parts of Jodhpur, Jaisalmer, etc., vulture population is still there.
When I enter Delhi, I see those vultures.
Those are kites.
Oh, those are kites. Okay.
Those are kites. Those are not.
Oh, okay.
So the vulture has a very trademark.
So they're not prominent in
Yeah.
Delhi? They're not really here in
Now
Delhi.
you see no vultures in Delhi. It would be a rare sighting. It will put in a ripple of excitement if a vulture is sighted in
okay.
India now.
Okay.
You know, in North India now, except for the Himalayas and parts of Rajasthan, you don't have any endemic species. You do have some migratory vultures who come. And it is only while doing this story I realize how important any one single species can be.
Right.
So the job of the vultures is actually like a janitor, like a cleaner in a building.
Right.
It is only vultures who, in a cattle owning country like India,
Right.
it's the only bird that can finish off a full, say a dead body of
carcass.
of a carcass, crows and dogs.
What about the kites?
I've heard
The kites,
crows.
yeah.
I've heard
Kites.
about crows.
So they can't finish up a dead body. And the second problem is that the vultures stay on one particular habitat wherever they are. Say they will stay in the outskirts. They don't like to live with human habitation. So no infection comes back to the village. Whereas a crow or these stray dogs or kites, they would feed on the clarion or on the carcass and come back to the village pond, and the infection can spread. So we have a very important link missing now. So anyway, now it just shows that every project has its own life.
Its own life.
Yeah.
So you have experience in wildlife and social issues. Do you have to wait for the animals to smile at you, or these vultures you searched for?
No, I think there are a lot of issues which we all don't realize. For instance, everybody today talks about solar energy, or they talk about electronic vehicles, and they think it is a medicine for all problems. Pollution will go. There is never that. You have to evaluate your technology fully before you introduce it in any environment. For instance, some of the most toxic e-waste comes out of the batteries. So tomorrow, if you have a situation where a large number of petrol vehicles are phased out and EV vehicles are introduced, you have to first work out on what you are going to do with the battery waste, with the electronic waste.
Actually.
Yeah. In fact, this is another story in which we, by strange circumstances, we have managed to do some change.
So Nutan, are you aware of the locations you have to go to, or do you have to search?
Everything
for
is
them?
research based. In
Research-based.
journalism and in filmmaking, you are as good as your research. So unless your research is good, unless your sources are credible,
Right.
unless the people who are giving you inputs are credible, your voices are authentic,
Right.
your characters are really fit, you don't have a story.
You don't have a
So,
story.
so this is the most important aspect, that you must have very good research. In fact, the only projects that stand the test of time are those in which the research has been very good.
Very, very
So I would say that before any filmmaker comes onto the field and starts and picks up a camera, should have written his or her rough script, should have gone over their research, should have checked out and spoken to the people that they aim to interview.
Like you said, some projects take 1 year and
Yeah.
some take
Yes.
Right.
But script is the key. It's the spine of the show.
spine of the show. So do you have any upcoming projects?
There are a lot of things which are in my mind, but I do want to do a big story on endemic dogs. I want to do something on indie dogs. The reason is that I feel that everything in India it has its own sort of. For instance, we are all obsessed about exotic pets and exotic breeds, and we don't know the backstory. We don't know how breeders treat, what they do to get these exotic breeds and how these animals are treated. So all dog lovers must adopt stray dogs rather than buy exotic breeds.
I think that's a
So,
fantastic
Yeah,
thought.
so that's something that I'm working on. But there are a lot of people who've already worked great stuff in this already, which I feel very happy about. For instance, somebody has got a book of dogs in which they've interviewed a lot of people who adopted dogs.
Okay.
So I think that's an important step,
Nutan, before we wind up, I would like to ask you, would you have any message to share with the budding filmmakers who are listening to us?
I would say that there is nothing more important than having a voice. The youngsters must have a voice that expresses their concerns and their beliefs. I think the youngsters are the biggest hope. Their generation has a lot more answers than we did.
Right.
Our generation believed in owning. Their generation believes in experiencing. And all our innovation now has come from that. And I have great faith in them. If you look at some of the best innovations today, which are, say, Uber, imagine the biggest car company today owns no cars. If you look at Airbnb, the biggest hotelier doesn't own any hotels. And how they have made the society so inclusive. So somebody who owns a beautiful home gets to share it with somebody who gets to experience it, all because of technology. So the answers lies with these innovations and with the youngsters. I have great faith in their way of thinking. And I think the same thing can happen in journalism and in social media.
Okay.
I think social media is today seeing a very toxic phase. I would want that energy to not go into toxicity, but to go into making world a more happy place.
You're right.
So we have to invest in happiness.
I also explained, like when Instagram came, I was in like school only that time, and I installed it. It was for photographers and artists to show their work, to get into the world. But now, if you see, it is totally different thing, like what it was.
I feel, for instance, that Twitter has gone very wrong.
Yeah.
It needs to come back on track. I think Insta has a great potential, but it can sometimes give a lot of negative messages to youngsters. For instance, instead of being excessively thin, excessively consumer oriented, excessively showing the brands, it has to show people on how to live better, how to enjoy better, and a more happy life. So I think investing in happiness.
So I think
we have a youngster here, of course, with us.
We have a youngster here who would
I can relate,
endorse.
actually.
I'll say one more thing.
Yes.
For example, when I did a story well, I remember my boss wrote me a very small posted, on a post stamp. He just wrote a note to me, and I still have it. If he had sent me a WhatsApp, I think it wouldn't have been anywhere. So, so I think a mix of the old medium and the new medium is very important.
I always like the old medium, not the new medium. So I think, this can be a best question to ask you, the changes we have seen in this industry.
Well, I would say to the youngsters, keep a positive copy of all your photographs. Otherwise, every time your computer crashes and your phone gets lost, you lose a lot of memories.
Cloud now, we have cloud. We can.
So as Nutan was mentioning the generation gap, how the youngsters have better technology, and you proved it.
Yes.
But I think we should use it.
But your generation, Anand, that is going to correct things, and you have a much better opportunity to do it.
So on this note, shall we thank Nutan? It was really exciting and inspiring to be with you.
Thank you
here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for this initiative, and all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.